Okay, look, we might push on. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If people could probably sit on mute until they want to say something, that'll just make it easier with so many people on the line. And probably just to reiterate a comment that I made in the meeting request too, that this isn't about meeting to come up with a decision to suit rowing for everyone in Western Australia. We respect the right of each club and ultimately each individual in terms of how they manage themselves and their safety through this period. One thing we wanted to highlight, and it was noted in the position statement that we put out, obviously around the physical and mental well-being that sport, and obviously in our case that rowing, provides to our members. I think during this time, you know, I've got my in-laws have sort of self-isolated just as a protective mechanism, and they're already getting bored. You know, I think sport and rowing has a role to play where it can be safe and where it still meets the guidelines of the government as that continues to change. We've got a community, I guess, role to play in, again, when it's safe, to provide an opportunity and an outlet for people to support their significantly their mental well-being through this period. Obviously, hopefully, you've all seen the information that we've been putting out. There's a few additional updates I've added to that webpage we've created today. The updates today, none of them were Rowing WA specific, but there was a new fact sheet put out by Rowing Australia. Some similar things that we've put out in our previous position statement, and there was an update from the IOC just around Olympic things. Probably there was nothing in that Olympic one, obviously, of what we do at grassroots too much. Look, today, and I would hope that we could hold these reasonably regularly as things progress as well, was for clubs to have an opportunity to hear from Rowing WA, and in this instance, we've got Ian from Rowing Australia on the phone as well, and Ian will give an update in a minute as well. But for you guys to talk about what you're doing and how you're planning on managing your clubs through this challenging time. You know, from Rowing WA, besides obviously, we've obviously cancelled or suspended the commencement of our season at the moment. You know, there's obviously things, as there is for all of us, there's financial implications for doing such things, where we're doing some scenario planning at the moment around financial case and what, you know, a worst case could look like for us, and a few other iterations as well, as no doubt you are all doing. So it'd be good to hear from each of you around, I guess, what you're doing from a safety management perspective, but potentially a financial planning perspective as well, just around club sustainability, so we can all come out the other side of this thing. David, did you want to add anything to that?
I think you've covered it pretty well, Daniel.
Be quiet there still, David.
Sorry, I think you've covered it pretty well, Daniel. Happy to respond as we go through to any queries or comments that people have got. I'd reinforce perhaps what you said, that clubs will make decisions, and providing they're within the guidelines, we support clubs' independence to do that. And also, obviously, individual rowers are going to make decisions, you know, which should be guided by that advice as well. But I think it is a multi-dimensional problem. The principle that's been driving government policy at the moment should be one that we keep in mind, which is this idea of flattening the curve. And that's, you know, through all of the practical things that have been suggested in all of the advice. But by the same token, you know, sport does play a pretty important role, as does culture and, you know, cultural interaction, and to imagine a very long and extended period without any of that is going to be incredibly damaging in other ways to people's physical and mental health, to the economy, and to a whole lot of other things. And that is what I read is driving government policy, and we've just got to make sure we bear in mind this is a multidimensional thing as we make our judgments as well. But anyway, let's get going around the grounds and see what comes up.
No problem. Thanks, David. And look, I'll just quickly touch on the information that came out of the Minister for Sports office yesterday as well. So, Honourable Richard Colbeck developed and sent out the community sport guidelines issued to national sporting organisations, and we had a catch up with all the other state CEOs and Ian earlier today, and sort of had a look through these and discussed any not concerns, but matters related to this advice that potentially is going to have an impact on rowing. And it really didn't. There was probably nothing overly new in there, nothing new in there at all. Really just reiterated the application of the broader government advice in a sporting context, which I think has been already largely picked up in the position statement that we put out, and obviously the additional advice that Rowing Australia put out today. So I might flick over to Ian from Rowing Australia and ask Ian to give a bit of an update. So I guess what's happening on his front. And Rowing Australia are also in the process of developing a bit of a Q&A, a video Q&A, which is, I believe, intended to be released probably tomorrow. But Ian might be able to give us a bit of a snapshot about some of the questions they're getting asked a lot.
Thanks, Daniel and David and colleagues. It's great to talk to you all. As Daniel has said, what we've endeavoured to do over recent days that has really intensified since last Friday night, when David and Daniel and Craig James, along with fellow state CEOs, presidents and council members from around the country, participated in a teleconference that I convened along with my RA senior colleagues and our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Lisa Elkington, and it was in that forum that we essentially delivered the news that we believe we were going to have to move to cancel the Nationals, and that was finally ratified and resolved by the RA board on Saturday afternoon. We then moved quickly in consultation with the Rowing Australia Masters Commission to follow quickly with a similar decision for Masters. And to be candid with you all, the reality was that with the guidelines around mass gatherings, in effect, those decisions were made for us. But it was important that we followed due process. It was important that we had good level of communication and consultation in an environment, as David and Daniel both said. There are so many elements to this, and one of the key elements to it is just how quickly things are changing, not just daily, sometimes hourly, and trying to keep pace with it has been a bit of a Herculean task, because if there's one thing that is unprecedented at the moment, it's the use of the word unprecedented. I've been in sport 25 plus years, and never have I had to deal with something as profound as this. And when you play the role as the CEO of a national sporting organisation, you'd like to think you'd be in a position to be able to be a strong source and a ready source of solutions. But in this instance, it's incredibly difficult, complex. There's a strong medical element. There's a strong public health policy element, and that's why in all of the decisions that we made, we wanted Dr. Lisa Elkington very much at the core of our thinking and our assessment of the information. And to give you some context there, Dr. Lisa Elkington speaks daily with Dr. David Hughes, who's the Chief Medical Officer of the Australian Institute of Sport, who in turn speaks daily to Dr. Brendan Murphy, who is the Commonwealth Chief Medical Officer. And you will have seen him at the press conference with the Prime Minister as recently as yesterday morning. It was off the back of that press conference that revised community sport guidelines were released, what we've tried to do is not prescribe what clubs should do. It's to be diligent in ensuring that what we provide is the up-to-minute information and advice from the medical perspective, and then for each club, each regatta, each committee to make decisions based on their own risk assessment. The video that we're going to put out tomorrow does speak to some very common questions about should our clubs continue to operate, what does this look like? Of course, on this side of the country, in Victoria, Tasmania, New South Wales, South Australia, ACT, they're pretty much going into winter mode, significantly sort of scaling down operations. But I certainly recognise that in WA and Queensland, it's very different as you start to crank up your season around regattas and other events. So there's a different lens to be looked at, and each case then should be worked through on its merits. But the advice that and the Q&A that we're going to provide tomorrow in a video form hopefully gives some further clarity on the elements or the things that should be considered in that risk assessment. We're also, I think David and Daniel, I heard right, the head of the river got cancelled over there, whether it was yesterday or today, and it's replicating what's happened in many other parts of the country. And with a son in year 12 myself, I know how emotional and how gut-wrenching those sorts of decisions can be for those young boys and girls who've dedicated so many years of their school journey to an event like a Head of the River, let alone state championship, let alone nationals. So we're going to get some athletes at our NTCs, both male and female, to record some messages of genuine empathy and support to reach out to the group around the country who've perhaps missed that final racing performance. So I would commend that what Daniel has done and what David is doing as president of Rowing WA has been incredibly proactive. We support all of the messaging that goes up on the web page and that you're getting from the office, and the fact that messaging or advice might change from Wednesday to Tuesday or from Thursday to Wednesday doesn't mean that the advice that was given today was wrong. It means that the advice that was given today was right for today. And as a consequence of other developments or other activities or other government advice, then we all have to adjust accordingly. I really want to reiterate strongly what Daniel said at the outset, that the great irony in one sense, particularly not just in a physical, but a psychological well-being, is that the importance of sport, ironically, is going to be only ever more emphasised as a consequence of it being, at its most confronting, taken away from us. And this new norm of flattening the curve, as David said, and the responsibility and the role that we have to play in this, so that we understand the impact on the world of rowing, but we also need to understand the impact on the world around us, and we're all going to be living that through various lenses. The final piece, Daniel, is and then happy to take any questions, a bit like as David has outlined. We're obviously looking at this through the Olympic lens as well. We've got all of the regattas in Europe that we were going to go and compete at. World Cup 2, World Cup 3, para qualification and Olympic qualification in Italy and Switzerland have all been cancelled. So we're awaiting clarification on what that means for final qualification for both the Olympics and Paralympics. But I suppose more fundamentally, we're waiting to see what happens with those events themselves. And the media conference that Matt Carroll, the CEO of the AOC, and Ian Chesterman, the chef de mission of the Olympic Games team, gave today was certainly very robust in their belief that the Games will go ahead, which is following on from the advice from Thomas Bach, the president of the IOC. We all might have our private views that, wow, that seems to be them swimming against the tide when virtually every event on the planet has either been cancelled or rescheduled, and what makes it different for the Olympics. And we might all have those private views, but for now, all the support we're putting around the two athlete groups at the NTCs is that it's business as usual. We will be their source of truth, not the media. And for now, it's head down, bum up, and get on with work and prepare. That now will be a domestic-based preparation. We won't go to Europe at all. The men will stay in Canberra, the girls will stay at Penrith, and then we'll move up into Rockhampton in June, and that's the plan before we head off to Tokyo itself. So that side of the business is doing what it needs to do. But I've certainly had a level of engagement right around the country with Daniel and his colleagues, and we'll continue to do so as we manage our response. We provide collegiate support to each other. And also share experiences from other sports as well. I've been talking to a range of my colleagues in sports like swimming and athletics, hockey, water polo, surf life saving, to name triathlon, to name a few. And we weren't the only sport to cancel the Nationals last weekend. It was sadly in the end a bit of a rush. So, Dan, I sort of perhaps want to leave it there in terms of overarching remarks, and then happy to respond to any questions that maybe you or David have, or more broadly, any of your colleague club presidents have.
All right, thanks, Ian. Did anyone have any questions for Ian at the outset before we sort of get into a bit of an around the grounds?
Yeah, look, I did, Dan.
No worries, Pete from Fremantle.
Look, Ian, thank you for providing some clarity around the situation. My concern with what you've said there is that you're allowing the clubs to make their own risk assessment. Now, the issue I have with this is that, you know, as you said, you're talking to doctors daily. We're not. You know, we're not in the position, I feel, to be making the risk assessments with apt information. And I think it's really important that Rowing Australia understands that in times like this, all clubs, especially small clubs of 10, 20, 30, 40 people that don't have a doctor within their membership, that don't have, you know, frontline medical staff within their membership like we're fortunate enough to have, to provide information to direct the club. So what they're going to be looking for is guidance from Rowing WA and Rowing Australia to make decisions. Now, we've got a very high risk membership in terms of how many masters we have in our sport compared to other sports. I think it's really important that it's not just left to clubs. This is my opinion now. That's not solely left to clubs, because we're not getting the daily updates that you're getting. But we are looking to you to provide that information to us. And we are going to be acting on what is provided by you guys. And I think it's really important that you understand that our risk assessment, while we're making ourselves, is based on what you're providing. And I think that needs to be really clear. And look, thank you for what you're doing and the work that you're doing and the way you're doing it. We do appreciate it, but I just think it's a little bit remiss, and maybe you're not appreciating that we're not getting the same information as you, and our risk assessments are going to be poorer than Rowing Australia's.
Peter, Ian, can I just respond to Peter first, and then you?
Sure.
The reality is that if you turn the television on and listen to the medical updates, or if you go on the government website, health website, you will get all the advice that is generic and relates to the whole of the Australian population. There are two things at play here. One is the specific risk to specific people from catching a virus, and the potential that they might be hospitalised, and the potential that they might die as a consequence of that. That's one thing, and that is incredibly specific to your specific circumstances and your specific membership. And we can't have us sitting centrally at Canning Bridge, or Ian sitting centrally in Sydney or Canberra or Melbourne doing and providing that type of advice. It is necessarily a federal system, and then is necessarily got to go to individual clubs with your individual personalities and your individual circumstances to make calls. But the advice itself is very clear, and the advice around anybody who is suffering a medical condition, anybody who is likely to be more susceptible, needs to fall into a different category than those that don't, and you need to act accordingly. The other reality is that individuals also have all that information. Individuals should be taking personal responsibility for their own safety as well through this. So I think it's a multi-layered thing. The advice has been coming as quick as it can, and you can supplement that with the government website. But the other part of the problem is really around this kind of flattening the curve thing, which is really about reducing the spread of the virus, which is not specifically about individual safety within your club. It's about the community as a whole in Australia responding in a particular way that's coordinated, so that it reduces the rate of spread of this, so that we don't fill our hospital wards with too many people who need ventilators, etc. That needs to be, essentially, we need to follow the rules around that. That's what that means. But my point about it being multidimensional is the reason that the rules have to be set Australia-wide is because they only work if the whole community does it. And the government is really the only place that type of that kind of policy and settings can be set, and we need to follow the rules that come from there. And there are lots of commentators, there are lots of opinions flowing thick and fast through all of this. And you know, my strong position on it is read the official position and use that to guide your decisions. The spread of this thing is going to be prevented by the hygiene, the distancing, and you know, the reduction in sort of large group activities, etc. All those things that have been, you know, well telegraphed for, you know, a couple of weeks now. Those are the kind of things that need to affect that part of your decision making. So think of it as twofold. Firstly, protect the vulnerable in your membership, and that is a case, you know, we've got clubs that are essentially all masters. They have to make different decisions than ones that have got a large youth membership. So we've got to let these decisions be made on a club by club basis, and I think that's you know, we all bear responsibility. That's the burden of leadership within your club, and the burden of leadership that we take as a state association, and the burden that Ian and his board take as a national association. And we can't abrogate our responsibility to anyone in this. We have to make those decisions, right the way down to individuals have to make decisions as well.
Look, I understand your point. I do understand your point, but I think what you got to remember is, as clubs, we're very focused on the minute. We're not looking at the wider individual, the wider everything. You know, we're making decisions based on the protection of our members at our club.
Correct. I encourage you to do that, Peter. Do that. But absolutely do that.
But this is bigger than that. This is much bigger than that. We need to be protecting every single person in this country.
That's right, Peter. And the way you do that is you follow the rules. Just follow the rules. The rules are: don't organise a gathering internally inside of more than 100 people. Don't organise a gathering of more than 500 people outside. Practice and good hand hygiene. Practice good social distancing, etc., etc. Those rules are out there for the whole community, and it only works if the whole community, you know, as a whole community thing. It doesn't work by, you know, people. By us mandating anything more than what the government's mandated. The government's mandated. They're going to put this stuff into law. So, you know, and that's mandate. I mean, that's pretty simple.
Look, this is, you know, look, I'm not going to argue about it. I'm just going to make my point, knowing that I think that there's a lot of clubs out there with very, you know, we're not risk assessors. Not everyone's going to be a risk assessor.
I'm not asking you to assess risk, Peter. I'm not asking you to assess it. I'm just asking you to follow a set of rules. Just follow the rules. You can't possibly assess the whole community risk. You're not an epidemiologist. Nor are we. We're not trying to do it either.
But Rowing Australia's got some resources that we don't have.
Yeah, but hang on. Look, I'll let Ian talk in a moment. But the resources there are helping to interpret, you know, some of the resources and advice that's coming out of the federal government in a rowing context, and that's being fed to us all. But it doesn't get any, you know. We can't send a medical resources and epidemiologists to Fremantle Rowing Club and to every other rowing club to. And
this is what I'm saying, David.
Yeah,
I'm saying that
you don't need to, though. You don't need to.
We are looking to the advice of Rowing Australia, and I think Rowing Australia understand that. So when they say we need to make our own decisions based on our own risk,
correct. That's correct. And you've been and we'll keep providing that information, Peter. And if you feel like the information's not clear enough, then please provide specific feedback on that, and we'll respond accordingly.
Okay.
Sorry, Ian,
did you have anything to add?
Look, I think, Peter, I thank you for your passion and all of what you do at your club, and for all of you on the call today. You know, I've done a couple of roadshow visits. I think I've met many of you on those visits over the last couple of years, and I look forward when there's a new normality to all of this later in the year, to which was when I was planned to come anyway, to seeing many of you again. Look, so much about what David said is right, because the first rule with the personal hygiene protocol is if you are unwell, you shouldn't be anywhere. You shouldn't be in public. You shouldn't be at work. You certainly shouldn't be at your rowing club or your gymnasium. That's the first rule, and that's a protocol for all of us as citizens before we talk about our roles as club secretaries or as rowers. So understanding those protocols is what's embedded in everything that's on the RA website, Peter, and what's embedded on the RA website are links to the websites that are being updated daily by the AIS in conjunction with the advice they're getting from government. So we're not in a position, we don't have the resource to churn stuff out in a mass sense, because to be candid with you, to David's point, most of that churning and sharing of intel is being done by the mass media for us all. But the websites that are carrying the sport specific and the AIS specific Corona website is embedded in everything that's on the Rowing Australia website. So if there's been any change, and the advice we put out today, we're going to follow that up with a video tomorrow, and we're going to follow up with some more videos that speak to some of the younger athletes, as I said, who've had some real disappointments and profound disappointments at the end of their rowing and their school rowing careers. So I really encourage you to embrace all of what David has said, but I also encourage, if there are any questions, these are exactly the sort of forums that they should be asked. And beyond what you hear tonight, if you've got anything specific, ring Daniel, ring myself. We're all in this together, and you know, there are no silly questions in any of this, because we're all searching for answers. And the principle that will underpin all of this is that collaboration and that sense of responsibility. And what David's saying is exactly what Pat McNamara, the Victorian RA Council member, said the other week about understanding the perspective here of, yes, there's going to be some big impacts for our sport, but we're talking about something here. This is a one in a century event that's impacting us all as citizens of our great country, and we've got to find a way to play our role. We think there is still a role for sport, and the risk assessment gets down to then things like what's the hygiene set up in your club? Do you have hand sanitizers? Are we going to ensure that people bring their own towels? What are we going to do to ensure that the oars are clean? There's a lot of really specific and very granular advice when you break it down, Peter. But at its most fundamental, it's the advice that we're all being given as citizens. If you're not healthy, don't go out. Cough into a tissue or cough into your elbow. Wash your hands for 20 seconds. All of those things are across everything that we do, and I can't encourage enough to all of you to ensure that we embrace that.
No problem. Okay, look, we might head around the grounds. I'll start with my first picture I can see, which is Jared. Jared, do you want to let us know what's happening at Champion Lakes?
All right. Can you hear me properly, everyone? Cool. Regardless of what's going on at Champion Lakes at this point in time, we are a smaller club, so it's something that Peter issued that he explained earlier, that we got fewer members than any other clubs within the state. So for us, you know, we don't have members who are doctors or anything like that. So we are relying on the information that comes from Rowing Australia and Rowing WA, and as well as every other media outlet, to make sure that what we put in place is actually beneficial to everyone within our club, because we have a mix of masters and pennant rowers as well as juniors as well. So we've got a very strong mix. So our masters rowers at this point in time, they're sort of backed off their training, so they're not down at the lake as much as I'm aware and everything. So they're limiting their training time just purely because of the amount of cases that's been confirmed with COVID-19, is that it's mostly been people of age at this time and everything. So we limit that and everything, but also anyone who mentions to us that they're sick, we tell them, don't come to training, stay home, look after yourself, and then let us know when you are better and you're cleared by a doctor to say that you can come back into the club, back to the club training with no hassles and everything. So that's what we're making sure our members do whenever they do fall ill, whether it's like flu-like symptoms and everything like that. We've also just making anyone, from what I've gathered from the members I've talked to within my own club, that we've made sure that if they have travelled, that they do follow the rules that's been set. That they self-isolate themselves for 14 days, and that once that 14 days is cleared, they don't show any signs of anything of COVID-19 or anything like that. They are welcome to come back to the club and do whatever it is needed, whatever is set up in training for here at Champion Lakes. So for me, it's and everything. It's just simply just following what's been set out, and that we do everything we can within our club to say that we disinfect everything that has that we, us as rowers, and everything that we we use. That would be oars, boats, everything. We make sure that we wash our boats every time after each use, and we also wash our oars, the handles, the blades, everything that that we would touch most that we touch the most. Trestles as well, to actually, because we all touch and everything. So we just identify the areas that most of our members would be touching, and that we disinfect all of that equipment, to making sure that whenever it's the next person who uses it, they can use that equipment without worries. So that's all I could offer on that end. Thank you.
Look, good advice, and I think the main thing is just making sure you're communicating regularly, I think, with your members. So in terms of comms, anything that we send out, I'll make it clear in terms of who that's being sent to. Obviously, some of the comms we've sent out membership-wide, only the one. So anything I send directly to you, I'll make sure, residents, I'll make sure that it's very clearly identified who that's been copied into. You can understand who you should be talking to. Stuart, do you have anything different on top of what Jared said in terms of what you're doing at Murdoch? Obviously, an older demographic, being a predominantly Masters club. Have you taken any additional measures?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Look, just also supporting what David and Ian were saying, the consistency of information coming from both the World Health Organization through to the health.gov.au websites is something which just simply spells out in very simple terms the steps that the community need to take, and businesses need to take, and sporting organisations need to take to try and get the community through it. Just some specific things. The minister's statement yesterday, we've actually circulated to members in the club. We've got a committee meeting in about an hour and a half, which will be devoted tonight to looking at COVID-19 from the club's perspective from a number of angles. We're fortunate to have albeit recently retired, a very experienced GP as a member of the committee. And talking to Pauline, she'll be active in the discussion, but likely supporting again the information that's coming through from the health.gov.au website. We've circulated, I think it's 3 or 4 emails to our membership at the moment, covering off on the material that you had sent out, together with some information around what we're going to be doing with equipment in terms of washing boats, oar handles particularly, and oars with soap and water rather than just the water that you normally use. We're also, and I've been actually doing this for a client of mine, preparing a handbook on COVID-19, which is actually based on information out of World Health, Australian government, and some major multinational companies, which will be circulated to members. And we're also going to need to have a look at our financial situation going forward as well, because we rely on a number of events, things like Bunnings barbecues and hosting regattas, supply, as on top of our membership fees, actually fund our club. So we're likely to lose a fair slice of our income this year, so we're going to look at how we manage our service through that. The absolute pinnacle concern will be the safety of our members, making sure that our Masters members, who in fact go into their 70s and 80s, are well looked after, but also well aware of it's a joint responsibility that everybody carries in terms of making the environment as safe as we can for everybody.
Muted. Thanks, Stuart. I'll just take
I think you're muted, Dan.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Lovely. Look, thanks, Stuart. I'll just take a quick sec to talk briefly about financial impact, and one thing I've been asked about a few times today, rowing WA fees and what's happening in that space. And all I can say at the moment is I don't have an answer for you. So our board will meet again within the next week to fortnight, I'd suggest, where we will look at, I guess, financial impact of this. And I think in a week or two, we might have a bit more of an understanding sort of whether we're starting to lower that curve or flatten that curve, or whether it's getting further out of control, which might give us a bit more understanding of the impact. So I'll probably park those. At the moment, the board hasn't had that discussion yet, but it will be on our radar. I might flick to Mike in Bum. Or anything additional happening down there?
Yeah, look, I got to start off with a disclaimer before I talk, because what I'm about to say, you can take or leave. I work in the medical profession, so in my office I've got around 10 doctors, none of which are connected with the Chief Medical Officer. However, they are all frontline in emergency department. And actually one of them just got off the phone to the media. So this virus cannot be underestimated. Hand washing, good hygiene is important. However, it's transmitted just by standing with someone. There's reports now about 1.5 meters not being enough, and just literally by breathing. Now, I can relate to both Pete and Jared, because we met last night, and at our meeting last night, we decided that we were going to enforce singles only, no crew boats, make the gym off limits, put all hand hygiene, washing equipment, disinfecting. But then news today, speaking with the doctors, we've actually decided that an announcement will come out tonight, we'll close our club. Now that is not just for our members, that is contributing to, as we've all coined the term, of spreading the curve or minimising the spread for the impact of our healthcare system. There are debates about herd immunity and that, but in this instance, just for an example, when they talk about closing schools, so I can only refer to our hospital in Bunbury. 60% of the hospital workers have school-aged children. So when you close the schools, obviously those 60% have to look after those kids and can't be taken away from the front line. I bring up that because we need to be able to encourage this social distancing. For us, it's a case of closing the club, not because we want to, but it's minimising that risk, not just for our members, but for everyone in the community. So that, for us, that's massive. We've got hall hire, so all our events cancelled. We've got a restaurant next door. We've got a gym. All activities, all social will be closed. We're not going to lock our doors. So if members do it, they do it at their own risk, so to speak, because the other thing is, if our club has said to allow members to row and something happens in the future, someone contracts it, I don't want any responsibility of that. We know that we'll put measures in place. Everyone has to disinfect, hygiene, but we know by nature that won't always happen. Due to the seriousness, this is basically off the recent conversation just with, so my boss is associate professor, and I take what he says very seriously. Yeah, so that's it for us. So we will make an announcement tonight and deal with those consequences. I will sign out from that.
Mike, and thanks for those insights. And I think I've spoken to a few other clubs that have obviously got their own links with medical advice as well, and they all vary somewhat. I think this is where clubs have that ability to, clubs that have that sort of reference point can have that ability and obviously can make their own decisions. And part of this sharing is to share some of that information, but also I think, from our perspective, I hope you recognise that the advice that we need to take comes from sources like Australia. And I think even national advice, there's obviously the crisis is at different levels or different scales.
Yeah, can I just add to that, Michael? Thanks for your obviously very passionate comments, and I'll just reinforce what I said at the beginning. Individual clubs will make individual decisions. I think, though, I just do say to each individual club, though, your best source of information remains the official information. I think unless you've got any reason to believe that that the national government is not trying to affect the same outcome here, then I think it is the best form of advice, and that's what we need to take when we're looking at our contribution to the community impact. Unilateral decisions by individual gymnasiums, individual tennis clubs, individual entities in the community will have an imperceptible impact. The impact is going to come through government policy, telling us as a community what the response ought to be. The individual decision that you individually make about your members is entirely your responsibility, and I absolutely respect that. And I think everybody here needs to respect each other's perspectives on that, and you'll make those decisions based on the circumstances for your club.
Mike from Swanix, anything different happening over there?
Not really. I mean, I guess the main thing that we want to try and do is keep people engaged through this time. I think a lot of sounds like some clubs are closing and some clubs are keeping some level of operation. We are keeping some level of operation, but is at a substantially reduced level and a much more controlled level than what it was before, say having groups of only 4 people training at a time, where it's much easier to monitor and for people to be able to control their hygiene and that sort of thing. So that's one of the things that we're doing. We're organising things like more running sessions where people don't have to have any contact with club change rooms, the clubhouse or club equipment at all. They just need to rock up in the car, go for a run, and then drive home again without any contact with anyone. Similarly, bike rides and that sort of thing. Circuits up in Kings Park, just body circuits, that sort of stuff. So getting away from the shed a little bit, so that people have a little bit more breathing space, where it's kind of much easier to maintain the hygiene standards, maintain the social distancing, all that sort of thing. So we don't have any doctors or anything, or any links to medical professionals in the club. So we really are relying on really mainly the government protocols that we try and follow all the time. we're just trying to stay as updated with the information as we can. And, as new information comes out, we absolutely will adapt to that. If it means that the social distancing needs to increase, we'll change that and review basically every day, really. So aside from that, I think all the stuff about the hygiene and the disinfectant and all that sort of stuff kind of goes without saying. So we're not really doing anything more in that space than what other people are.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Cameron, Kurt, you?
Yeah, no worries. So basically for us, we're also following the direction of the university. So unis across WA and across the country are basically transitioning to online classes only. So they're looking to shut down classes, starting with classes that are like a lecture of 100 plus people, but really just minimising any form of on-campus contact. All events on campus have also been cancelled too. So the universities, there's a fair bit of uncertainty around them. But for example, social sports at Curtin has been going ahead, but they have recently just cancelled it. The hockey club at Curtin has decided to pull training and in alignment with the same dates that Hockey Australia put out and Hockey WA put out, which is sort of toward the end of May. So at the moment, we're the anomaly in that we are still training. But for us, it's sort of, again, same as everyone else, or the hand hygiene, washing down or handle stuff like that. There is an issue with availability of some, like hand sanitizers and things like that. I think everyone's facing that, but that's an issue for us. The other thing, which I guess hasn't really been brought up in conversation yet, but following the PSA pulling the pin for Saturday, the IGSA schools are now really considering what their rowing program is or could be for the season. So they're actually looking to follow the direction of Rowing WA in that to cancel regattas 1 and 2, potentially cancelling the season because it is such a short season. So at the moment, none of the IGSA schools are training. There could be 1 or 2, but my understanding is none of them are. They might restart next week or before the end of term, but I don't think any of them will. That's obviously going to have a flow-on effect to clubs in terms of membership, but I'm just conscious of, again, differences. The schools, I think, will be a lot more conservative in their approach. But if we've got some clubs doing one thing, some schools doing another thing, and then kids whose kid out of school saying they can't row, but then going to a club that can row, that document that's been sent out is super helpful to clarify that. But I'm just conscious of, again, making sure that we're very transparent in the community about the different messaging, and how we're all supporting the different clubs to continue or not to continue for their various reasons why.
Yeah, look, and I think there's a few other universities around the country that I'm already aware of that have closed their boat sheds through virtue of closing down the whole university. Not a new boat club. Closed on a university mandate, and there's a university in Canberra, I think it might be UC or ANU, who also closed their boat shed. However, I know ANU Boat Club is looking for another boat shed to roll out of.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cam. Nigel, from ANA, anything you want to add? I got your email earlier about the policy you put in place.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Essentially what we've done so far, we've got a pretty well-informed membership. We do have some medical professions, including people on the committee, and essentially we've just put the measures as recommended by a lot of the kind of literature coming out on COVID, so the sanitizer, the washing of oar handles, some behaviour changes in the shed, so social distancing, and just to make sure that we try and minimise any spread, and obviously advising people if they're ill not to come down to the club. So very common with what Jared was saying at Champion Lakes. We really haven't. We've kind of debated the prospect of allowing singles only as opposed to crew boats, but we're still allowing people to row crew boats at the moment. That might change. It's fluid. But we haven't really contemplated the prospect of closing the club. It's kind of I do feel to some extent that people are sufficiently well informed to make their own choices. We've obviously kind of we've circulated a fairly lengthy email on this to advise members and allow them to kind of contemplate what they would like to do, including, members that are more vulnerable, to possibly not come down or train out of busy hours. So that's where we're at as a club. Just one question, Daniel. You talked about the financial aspects. I'd be interested to know if Rowing Australia are going to be helping out the state organisations in any way, given the fact that the state organisations are probably a little bit more vulnerable in terms of, kind of reduced income coming in for this year.
Yeah, look, Sport Australia has asked all national sporting to essentially do a national review of the financial impact.
Sorry, Daniel, you're a bit breaking up. Daniel, you're breaking up there. If you could get closer to the microphone.
Sure. Sport Australia have asked all national sporting organisations to do a sort of a national review of the financial impact of COVID-19. Rowing Australia at the moment go around speaking with all state associations. It also takes into account what our financial health is, our reserves, and our ability to weather the storm. But it is obviously looking like there might be some coming out of the federal government to help sport in this space. I think once we know more about that, that will obviously, impact our ability to in the board. It'll impact our discussion. At a state government level, it hasn't been as formalised, the discussion. However, I have spoken with our consultant at DSR and have asked me to put in writing a little bit about that impact. I think both state and federal governments are having a discussion. We yet to find out anything specific.
We are losing you every now and then, Daniel. You're dropping. I think we got the gist of it, though. Nigel, did you get the gist of what Daniel was saying?
Yeah, I think there's some actions in place that are going to help out, so that's good to know.
Yeah, sorry, I think my internet connection's a bit dodgy at the moment. Just saying both state and federal level, there is some discussion around potentially some financial support, but we don't have any certainty around what that might look like. Jeremy from UWA, do you have anything further to add to the discussion?
Hi all. Just wanted to thank you, Daniel, for calling this teleconference. Really appreciate it, and it's a good idea for us to all share our ideas. Our club has taken a similar position to what Rowing WA and Rowing Australia have said, so trying to keep everything as disinfected as possible for as long as possible. We're also taking guidance from the Health Department and UWA, as Cameron has already alluded to with Curtin. For the moment, the position of UWA Sports is the same as Rowing WA, which is that it's up to the clubs whether they want to continue, and if they are to continue, to ensure they exercise appropriate duty of care for their members. For us, similar to what Cameron said, finding disinfectant is difficult. There seems to have been a run on the supermarkets for that sort of thing. So we've restricted pretty heavily our activities indoors. Particularly, we've banned our modest gym. We've banned using all ergos. We've banned using spin bikes. We've banned basically congregating inside at any time. The only thing that the disinfectant is to be used for is pretty much oar handles and boats. And even so, given the our own fleet restrictions, most of our sessions are revolving around running circuits similar to what Swans have said they're doing. So we're following the advice of the Health Department at this stage. We don't see any reason to deviate from that unless the Health Department changes their stance. But for the moment, we're pretty comfortable with that. Cheers.
Can people hear me better now?
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. Okay, it's my third microphone option for the meeting. Look, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for that. Pete, did you have anything else to add to what you said earlier and what's happened down at Freo?
Daniel, your sound has gone altogether.
Yes, it says my internet connection is unstable. Maybe it's got a bit of coronavirus as well. Pete from Fremantle, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, look, we met the other night, you know, as similar to Bunbury and what I know Westies, very similar meetings I feel like have gone on in the club. Health professional came in, member of our club, to speak about working on the front lines and their perspective on it. And based on those, and look, this was not a decision we made lightly, considering that we have, very similar to Bunbury, a commercial operations within our premises. We're closing our shed as effective today, and it's not a choice close. It is a hard close. There will be limited people rowing, young people who are looking at going to Australian selections in July only. We've closed our gym effective Sunday, and we have moved to, and you know, it is tough because this is the membership season for us about to begin. We had our season opener last week to try and rally people to buy a membership. So we are looking at doing, you know, a different model this year, and we're going to be looking, at least for the first couple of months, at being online only, small groups meeting up to train. Tom's still going to be sending out programs, but look, I think it's just look, I appreciate you know, everyone's opinions, and we're all going to have our own, and I do understand that. But I think one thing that drove our conversation last night or 2 nights ago when we made this decision was, you know, just look around the world and look at what's happening in other places. Look at Italy, look at Spain. They're 3 to 4 weeks ahead of us, and if not now, start planning for a closure, because it could definitely happen. Like it needs to be planned for by clubs, that membership's going to be disrupted, where, you know, and all these, you know, people are not going to be able to access sheds, and worst case scenario like Italy, we get confined to our houses. So I think it's important that while we very much stay positive, we need to start planning for the worst. And if you haven't thought about what you would do if your shed would close, how you would service your members, how would you make sure that people are engaged in your community still? Do you have online platforms that people converse still? They're the things that I think all committees should be talking about and thinking about. And it might never eventuate. We might be lucky. We might get away scot-free, and everyone and you know, the country survives this without having to go into lockdown. But I think we should all be planning for the worst, making sure that things are in place that, like I said, you know, people can stay fit and healthy in these times when you need to be fit and healthy. Stay connected, so you're not mentally isolated as well. And that's what we're looking at doing, and that's what we're moving to this year. So yeah, it was a big call for us to close, especially as most of our revenue comes from that gym. But we're just going to manage it as best we can. All right, that's it for me.
Thanks, Pete. And yeah, look, I think I reiterate, I agree that people need to understand what worst case might look like, and hopefully it never happens. But I think for the long-term survival of your clubs, and for us as Rowing WA as well as a sport, nationally, we need to understand what that might look like. You know, we're already started reducing our expenses here in the office, and you know, and we're reviewing our income streams at the moment. We're trying to shore up things like our grants and things to ensure that they're secure, or whether they are or not. Now, even things like the support we get from Rowing Australia, you know, related to nationals. Obviously, we won't be getting the travel subsidy. We do get another piece of income from them related to nationals, or the fact that nationals is locked in at Sydney. You know, there's $20,000 there, and that's not certain at the moment. You know, and there's lots of those sorts of things that we're reviewing at the moment. So I reiterate what Pete says. We all need to look at that, plan for the worst, hope for the best. I think I've covered every club. I know, Alan, you're there too. But did you have anything else to add to what Jared said about Champion Lakes?
No, mate, I think we've got that pretty well covered, and everyone else has covered most of the other stuff, I think. I don't think there's anything anything outside of that, we need to go on.
Can I just make one final comment, Daniel? I think we're all getting a rapid lesson in risk management at the moment. And having done a lot of risk management over a long period of time and a lot of previous, albeit localised crises, there is no such thing as removing the risk entirely. And there is no such thing as not having unintended consequences of what you're doing. The one thing I do think the advice that Peter's made about thinking about the possibility of lockdown is important. But I also, believe we, at any point in time, the best thing we can do is follow the rules at that time. So if lockdown comes, we lock down. And if we plan for it, we're going to be in a lot better shape than if we haven't planned for it. And that's very good advice. What I would also say is, and Daniel circulated it yesterday, there was a link in one of those documents to the benefits of the very significant benefit that sport provides to people's health and livelihood, mental health, physical health, and we play a really important role in the community, in our small way, in providing that to our membership. And so I think, Peter, what you said about thinking about other ways of providing that if you can't provide it out of the shed is important. I think what Nigel said about being, finding ways of making the shed available to people in a safe way is important. So I think different clubs, as I said at the outset, will approach this different ways. But I think we need to bear in mind that in addition to the obvious risk around COVID-19, we've got to remember that particularly if this thing's extended, shutting a community out from sporting, cultural, social norms for an extended period of time has never been done. And we've got to be very careful what we wish for if we end up in that situation. So again, we should be guided not by our own opinions on that, but remember that we do play, as a sport, we play an important sort of positive role. And if and to the extent that we stop playing that, that does also have consequences. So that's probably just the last comment from me. I respect everything that all the clubs are doing. I think I think it just reflects what I said at the beginning, that everyone has slightly different circumstances around this. And please also, I ask you to respect each other as well through this.
I think, and drawing on what Pete said too, I think wherever this crisis leads and whatever point in time that is, I think there's always a role for us as a club, or for you as clubs and us as a sport. It may mean, it's not about, we're not just about people getting in a boat and rowing. We're not just about people coming down to a fixed location, a physical bricks and mortar location. We're about people. So even in its worst case, if we are locked in our houses and we can't go out, we've still got the ability to communicate and then network within our own communities. So, I think again, I really like to, keep these chats going. I won't plan another date for one yet. I think we'll just wait on the advice, and if advice is changing, we might get together again. But please feel free to pick up the phone and give me a call at any time. This is obviously absorbing a lot of what I do, but obviously a large part of that, I want to provide the support that we can as a state association, and obviously that's been called out by quite a few of you. And I'll continue to provide advice as quickly as I can from all the sources that we're seeking that from as well. So look, thank you all. I have recorded this, so if anyone's got unless anyone's got an issue with that, I'd like to circulate that back to you guys to share to whatever networks you have, and obviously the clubs that weren't able to be online today. So if you do have any concern with that, please just flick me a quick email, maybe after you get off the call. Otherwise, I'll send it out tomorrow morning. But look, all of you, please stay safe and look after yourselves as well. you do have a big burden to wear in the roles that you play within your clubs, but please don't feel like you're in that alone. There's a whole group of you that are looking at the same issues, and we're always here as well. So please lean on this network as much as you need through this as well. So that's all from me. Have a good night, everybody, and look, we'll certainly be in touch in the coming days and weeks.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel.
All right.
Thanks, Daniel.
See you all later.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel.
Bye.